Good morning. Good morning. It is July 10th here on the Dev Talk Show, and I'm back with Rich. Good morning, Rich.
Morning, Chris. Happy Monday.
Yeah, it is Monday. How about that? So that's probably explains the slow start.
A little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very, I don't know about you, but a very rainy Sunday here in our area. We happened to get caught in maybe some of the worst of it coming back from Newark, Delaware. And so it was a slow drive up 95 when it was really coming down.
Oh,
But it was
wow.
okay. It didn't turn out to be as bad as I suppose it could be. But we were trying to wait it out too, because we were in a store and heard it start coming down and then heard it really loudly coming down. And so there's a bunch of people kind of waiting at the door going like, maybe I'll give it a few minutes. And then eventually somebody finally gives up and runs and gets their car. So
I gotta get home and this is an ending kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't look like this is going away. So here we are. Good to see you. And we've got a couple things we're experimenting with on the stream in terms of just viewports and stuff like that. We'll see how it goes. But the last couple episodes, we have been building a template that you could use with AZD init. And AZD is the Azure Developer CLI. And with AZD init, you can specify a template that instead of just, bringing up just a placeholder spots for your deployment and your code, you get a project, you get a sample deployment. And there's one other feature that you get. I can take it back. There's multiple other features that you get, but the next one we're going to look at is the Devcontainer that is built into the Devcontainer support that's built into AZD init. And if you just fill out, it seems to me that that's what we're going to look at today. If you fill out devcontainer.json, then your developers who use AZD init in your template, they get Devcontainer support right out of the box. So,
yes, which is pretty awesome. So it's container.dev.
All right. So let me, if you're ready, I'll switch over to your screen.
Go for it.
And
it's containers.dev. There we go. So yeah, what we're looking at here, that devcontainer.json that you mentioned, that's actually a specification. And cool. All the information around that specification is located on containers.dev. And what's cool is that you can certainly create this, and it's created in kind of a generic, or it's created to the specification. And that specification means that any application that understands how to interpret that the information that's inside of there can have your code run inside of a container. And what's really cool is that, you might have seen a couple times when we opened up Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, and our project had the little, I think I can still see it from the notifications, this thing down here in the corner. It's Monday. Nothing's up and running.
Oh, you know what? It's taken me a few episodes to go and add that to my startup services.
Oh, no, that's smart. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
So we have this here, which is basically saying, hey, let's take our project that you've got running inside of Visual Studio Code and not just have it run inside of Visual Studio Code, but let's have it run inside of a container. Well, why would you want to do that? So in this example, I'm a .NET developer, so I've got all the .NET components on my machine, so it's not really that much of an issue. But let's say I've got a project that is Python, which I don't have anything Python installed on my machine. I don't have, I think we initially had to, as part of this project, or something we were doing here on the show, had to install npm on my machine to get something running, which I didn't normally have. You could put all of that in a container, define that be included in the container based off of some base image, and then be able to now essentially develop inside of that container and not have to worry about, does my machine have the latest of these frameworks, or is there something that I don't have that I need to get before I can get up and running. So that's why we want to go down this path, because it makes it much easier for someone who is potentially not, in this case, a .NET developer, to get the template on their machine and get it up and running.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like dev containers. It's one of the things where for personal projects, definitely, I am trying to set that up pretty early. And even if I have the tools on my machine, it makes it portable. You can start, it enables it for a lot of different scenarios, including GitHub CodeSpaces, but even just host it in Docker desktop on your machine, or host it in Docker on your Linux machine, or there's just so many things that get enabled. Um, and there's the other quality of sameness of development environment
Right.
for everyone on the team working on it. Especially, let's say I could create a dev container with the preview version of the next tooling, and don't have to fight with it. I mean, not that it's necessarily a fight, just
Right.
don't have to worry about it. It's just there.
It's just there. Exactly. Exactly. So
So
what we're looking here is all of the, and I probably should close all these out. Close them all. Okay, down to the. So while this says, "Hey, you've already got a dev container, let's open it up for you," let's remember that dev container, the instance that's in there, came because we did azd init, and that gave us some of the structure around the various things that azd does for your project to make it easy to get from local to Azure deployment. So let's take a look at not the source code. Where are we? Dev container. So yeah, we've got a dev container folder here, and we've got a dev container JSON, and we've also got a Docker file, right? We've got both of these here, but you can see right there, it's an image that's a Python image, and that's fine. That's great, but that's not what um, we need. Something more than that, because we need our dev container specifically to include the .NET SDK so that we can go ahead and do essentially build out and code and develop and run our application inside of that container. So this one for us isn't going to necessarily work. So what we're going to do is plan to start is, so this Docker file that we have here, you see that we've got this registry, and that's the Microsoft registry for, in this case, dev containers. So what I'm going to do is let's open up a I think it's this one.
now so there's something that I've learned there is, I think in the past I have just gone and gotten an SDK image, which works. But
Yep.
this is interesting. I didn't know that there was also a /dev containers on this.
Yeah, and I've done the same thing as well. Grab the SDK or point to the SDK image, and I think that ultimately is where we wind up in with the dev containers. We should wind up with the SDK inside of there. But I think this, if let's just go back to the website here. So if we do mcr.microsoft.com, if I could spell, come on, there we go. So this is essentially Microsoft's artifact registry. So it's the official artifacts such as container images. And in this case, we can search for dev containers, and we get all of these containers that are, that we can use as dev container references. To your point, yes, if we, you can do this with any image you want. It doesn't have to be one of the images specifically listed here, and maybe you've got one that has your SDK in it, and you could certainly go ahead and do that. Here, I'm going to go ahead and click on this. It looks like I actually just updated as of 7.6.
Cool.
And I can define, this is where, so it gives some guidance on how you might want to choose. So if we just want the latest, we can use .NET. If we want, I think in this case, we want the 7.0 version. I think it's what we have in our project. Yeah, so we're using .NET 7.0, which is fine. Okay. And that writing is really small. Sorry about that. I also have it half screen, so let's do this. That's just really tiny font to begin with. So I got to really, really blow that one up. We look at the full list of all the image variants. So we can do that and see these are all of the possible options
Wow.
that we can include, right?
Yeah.
Including some of the dev. Interesting. And I'll be honest, I do not. I'm not. I know enough about containers to be dangerous, as we say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're aware why the bullseye, focal, jammy.
What are the tags for? I don't know for sure either. So what I'm trying to remember, and I don't know, is if it's related to Linux variants, because it's been a little while since I've looked at this. So yes, okay. So first of all, Ubuntu 22,
right,
was nicknamed
right?
Jammy. Yeah.
Okay.
And see, that's what I thought. I thought, like, is it related to Ubuntu? And then what was the other?
20?
Let's see, Bullseye. I'm just double checking because it's been a while. And so Debian 11 is Bullseye.
Okay.
So it could be that you might want Debian or Ubuntu. Now I could be wrong about that. Maybe. So Ubuntu is derived from Debian. It's a Debian distribution. I think that's a correct way of saying that.
Okay.
So I don't want to overstate it. It's possible that you could get a Debian Jammy too. The reason I mean, I am aware of these nicknames purely because a lot of times when I go to install Ubuntu and I go to their website and I grab the version that I'm going to install, it'll have names like this.
Yeah. So
and I know that. Yeah. Oh, okay. So maybe I was right that Jammy was Ubuntu and Debian, and Bullseye is more related to Debian. Yeah.
So yeah, and if Jammy's 22, I'm guessing Focal's 20.
No, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Sorry about that. So, let's see. Hold on a second. So, Focal Ubuntu, just to make sure, it was based on 20. Yep.
Cool. That makes sense. Okay. So I think what we want then is we want to make sure that we get 7.0 Jammy, because we are, and the reason we want to do that is because we're going to deploy this onto an app service plan that is a Linux machine running the latest version of Ubuntu, which is 22.
Yeah, I mean, but yeah. Right. The point is you have options. That's what's really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So what we want is, let's see. And we're kind of good with that reference there. Okay.
And you know what I don't remember?
What's that?
I suppose we could find this on the .NET Lifecycle site. Is it could be that .NET 6 and 7, that's as far back as the support goes. But I don't know that for sure. I'm not making that statement as definitive. Because you could ask yourself, like, why not 18? Why not 16? And that could be it. But that's okay. The point is there's a process here that works pretty well. Is you can go to the artifact registry, you can look up, like you did it from the beginning, where you basically said, hey, it's that particular registry link, when accessed in a web browser, brings you, they render a website. You can find the image you want, and then all the information you needed was right on the page as to, hey, here's what it supports, right?
Yes.
So
absolutely,
that's pretty good. I was not familiar with the artifact registry because I think that I had been pulling these from like the Docker Hub repository. I knew that these had become official. And so I would just head over there and grab something. And frankly, I would almost always just just do it sort of ad hoc, like, this seems good. So this is a little bit better.
Right. So this is, and to your point, this is what we're talking about here. Is a Docker Hub. Hub.docker.com gives you a location where many public images are available for us to download and use as starters. In this case, we're looking at a bunch of .NET. We could also look at, interesting, if we wanted to just go, kind of at the base image, as it were, for Ubuntu, we could certainly go ahead and grab that from here as well, and then layer other stuff on top of it that we want to get added, like maybe add our own SDKs if we want to. But if we needed to do that, which we don't, because we've got this other registry that has those pieces in there for us. Cool. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. All right. So let's close that. What's also cool inside of here, and I'm going to close up a couple of these notches. So we've got essentially our base image. All we did here was say that we're going to use the Docker file, and I'm going to clean up the Docker file a little bit. We don't need to run any of those at this point. All we're going to do is say image bullseye, which we don't need. Okay. That should be all we need from this, because we're not installing anything else. We're not adding any other apps or frameworks or anything inside of the Docker image itself this way, or running any special commands when it runs. I will say that you certainly could, let me see if it gives me the IntelliSense to do that. Image file. So that devcontainer JSON that we have here gives us essentially a structure. In this case, it's looking at, our structure is looking at a Docker file. We don't have to start with the Docker file. We could actually start with within a reference to essentially an image, which is what I'm looking for here, which is schema. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They might not have it in this sample, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, when we you've got three options. You can point to an existing image, you can point to a Docker file, and I'm blanking on what the third one is. It's no, it's just where it's located. Merge logic. Yeah, sorry. Image based, Docker file based, or Docker compose based. So you have three ways of essentially saying, this is the image I want you to jump into when you're in the dev container. There we go. So we could certainly bypass the whole Docker file, because we're not doing any other kind of build or we're not doing any other kind of additions to that component via a Docker file. So we certainly could change it up and do it that way. But I'm going to keep it simple. We still got the Docker file reference, and we'll just keep the Docker file simple to point to where it is that we're pulling this from. All right. And then we feed in the Jammy is the image, which is good. So that creates our base image. But then once we have that image, what do we want to do with it? Because everything that we might want to have or access or run commands from has to be inside of that container. So if we look at our dev features, hang on a second, let me get this. Do we show it in the right window? There we go. Okay. Wow.
That's small.
So what's cool here is that these are all of the things that can be included inside of Devcontainer that provides additional functionality. So like what per se? So in this case, the Azure CLI might be something that we want to include. So we would reference that by adding that feature information here, and then essentially reference that here is our list of features, or under our list of features, which I think right? So we could do something like that. We could bring in the Azure CLI, or specifically say this is the one that we want. And then be able to bring that, but that have that installed when that dev container gets created. I do think we also so that's if there are other things in here that we want, like if we wanted to include Git inside of here or the GitHub CLI. Those are some of the popular things that I usually see get thrown in there. If you're doing any kind of Terraform, you might want to have that in there. See if there's anything else that looks. That's a long list. There's action runners. Wow, that's pretty cool. So let's just see this. Let's see. Nope, that appears to be it. Okay. How about AZD? Nope. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there you go. So we actually could include the Azure Development CLI in there as well. So we can run our development CLI commands for provision and up and down and those kind of things inside of the container and not have them be installed on the machine as well.
Yeah, and the important thing to note here is that the devcontainer.json setup is setting up your development environment container.
Mm-hmm.
So you could imagine, like, well, what if my machine or the machine that I'm working on quite literally has nothing? Then
Right.
at least with this and maybe Docker or even just CodeSpaces or anything that supports this, you just go to work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Exactly.
yeah, this is not the same thing as setting up your target container when you build and deploy the app.
Right. Because those are going to be different, right? You're going to want your target container for when you deploy your application to be a little more lightweight. It doesn't need the full SDK. It just needs to have the runtimes in there.
The runtime, yeah.
All right. So we've got this. The other thing to consider is extensions, right? So inside of Visual Studio Code, you have what makes it a great editor is you have the capability to include any number of extensions that you might be working on. You see here, I've got quite a lot of them installed.
It grows fast.
It does. It does, between testing things out and finding the ones that you actually need. So what they're doing here is they're saying, well, if we think about this, you're doing everything inside of that dev container. So what's included in there is essentially essentially some of the bits of Visual Studio Code running inside of that container. Now you're accessing it from the Visual Studio Code that's running on your machine, but you're making a remote connection into there. So the extensions that are available here in my desktop version are going to be different than the ones that I have access to that are running inside of that container. So I've got to define what extensions I want to include in this list here. So when the dev container gets created, those extensions to Visual Studio Code can wind up here and here as well. I can forward any ports that are needed. Right now, we're not going to do that. And typically, your remote user is VS Code, but you can change that to be any specific user you might need. And then there's host requirements there. I think that explains. All right, that may come up when we go ahead and do. Yes, let's save. Cool. Okay. All right. All sound good? I think we're at a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I could see us fine-tuning the extensions because, for example, like the C# extension isn't in there.
Good point.
But and I don't remember what it is. I know you can get it by searching it, and you can get that string.
Let's hold off on that.
This work too. Yeah, we can just see this work. Yeah.
All right, so we've got our Docker file, and our devcontainer JSON is all saved. Is anything? Okay, I think we're good. So let's go. We had that little notification that said, well, I got rid of it. So how do we get back to running in a container? Well, this section down here in the lower left-hand corner essentially gives us a window to open up the remote functions. And those remote functions can be Devcontainer, but they can also be things like remoting into SSH, remoting into WSSL. You have a lot of capabilities, especially if you deployed the Devcontainer functionality, Devcontainer extension into your IDE. So what we're going to do is we're going to say reopen a container, right? If you, we're just going to say reopen a container. And I think we did a show on codes on Devcontainer.
Oh, we've done previously. A few, I think.
Yeah.
And it's usually from the point of view of, so far it's been the point of view of just developing in a browser by, you open, you basically can go to any repo in GitHub, click, and now it's even easier. Now you can click open code space from here, and it's essentially just creating a code space, putting it in your browser, Visual Studio Code pops up. And I think I don't remember if we only used some of the starter ones, because I have created my own, and I don't know if we demoed those, but that's been the general point of view, is developing with containers. You don't have to do it in a browser, but there's sort of that attraction of like, you can do everything locally. Here, what we're getting is, so I don't know if maybe some of this is, so no, hold on there. Now in features, up in your, let's see, up in the image tag, or you don't have an image tag, do you?
Because I have this.
Okay.
Right, which should map to this here. It gives us Devcontainers. Oh, I do. Right, so that now, hang on, that might be better because it defines the argument. The default is going to be this unless we pass one in, which is what we're doing here for argument. Okay, I think that makes sense. Let's try that again.
I didn't see what you changed.
Okay. I just backed out a change or a deletion of this line, the argument line, because that was not there. And I think what's happening is saying, if you don't define the argument, I can't pass anything in.
Oh, okay. So even though you're intending the Devcontainer JSON to pass in an argument, you weren't defining the argument at all to receive it.
In the Docker file, correct.
Yeah, okay. In the Docker file, right. All right, let's see. That seems a lot better than a few seconds ago when it was
we're actually pulling down layers.
Yeah.
So, and this is going to take a few seconds because we've not pulled down this image before.
Right.
So it's doing that and getting that image available in my local Docker instance, because I do have to have local Docker up and running on my machine, which I do.
Yeah. So you're using Docker Desktop for Windows. You could also, if you were on a Linux VM or a Linux machine, just install Docker, and this stuff works exactly the same. I know I've certainly done it just to see in a VM. Oh, it complained about something. It's really small though for us. So not all host requirements in Devcontainer JSON are met by the Docker daemon. Interesting. Oh, you went muted, I think. You might not have meant to.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's saying that Docker daemon is expecting, can only give me 768, and Devcontainer is saying, well, I need 768. So, or at least that's how I interpreted that. What we're going to say continue because I'm going to show you where it's complaining about that. If we go back to, now it's opening in a container. I will show you in the dev container specification that we have in just a second. Once it opens, and let me go ahead and re-edit. Okay. Yep, looks like it's installing the CLI now. That'll take a few minutes. So we can back and look at the file, but basically what happened was at the very bottom, there was a entry in the devcontainer devcontainer.json that said, I need 8 gigabytes of RAM memory. And it's saying, I can't give you 8 because 768 is all I've got. So if I was to drop that down to, 6 or something like that, it would not have that error anymore. But in this case, I'm getting as much as I can get, up to 8, essentially.
Okay, so it didn't. It wasn't fatal. It didn't end what you were trying to do. It's just telling you, hold on.
Yeah,
you're not getting one of the host requirements.
Yep, and it's saying it gave me that continue. Yeah, I accept it. It'll be a little bit less, or cancel. No, I don't want to go ahead and do this. So. So it's installing the extensions in Visual Studio Code.
Yeah,
or at least the portion of it that's running inside of the container, right? So it's putting all those in there. And I should be able to go back to here. There's the dev container. And then if I bring this down out of the way, this is the piece I was talking about, host requirements.
Now, did you add those host requirements, or were they already there from the sample?
They were there from the sample. And I think even if I was just to do, like if I started with file new project and didn't do the AZD init around it, I could, as part of the dev container capabilities inside of Visual Studio Code, I could say, create the dev container for this project. And even when it does that, I think it still gives you 8 gig because I've run into that error with other projects that I've not done AZD on. All right. I think we're good. We're up and running. You can see here we're editing on a dev container. And that Azure Developer CLI comes from, let me close that, comes from this name here. So we could name it whatever we wanted. But that is essentially the dev container instance that we're rolling into here. And yeah, so we're inside a container. So if we were to go ahead and do, hey, give me a new terminal window, you can see we can see that I'm inside of Linux, right? This is a bash command, a bash shell that we're running in.
Right.
So I've got those kind of commands here. And I still have the .NET version running inside of there. Let's take a look for comparison.
Okay.
Interesting. So yeah, we're running 8 on the outside and 7035 on the inside. So
right, because that was the image only has that.
Exactly.
So yeah, a little mind bending, but you're not on your host machine. You are, even though it looks like it, Visual Studio Code sitting right in front of you, but it's running in a container that's being hosted on, in this case, on Docker Desktop, and 70305 is the .NET version installed. So, so you have the .NET command line there.
So I've got those capabilities. Yep. And if things go well, I should be able to do .NET build. If I get into the right location. So, source.
It might just be source. Yeah. Yeah, I think you can build from there, but maybe not. Just because you have a solution file, but I guess, but I don't know. It's one of those things where I probably try it, and then if it works or doesn't, then I just forget about it. But certainly, yeah, .NET Build's going to work from here because you got a CS proj right there.
Yep. So we're doing that. We're building that inside the container. And cool. Succeeded, no errors. And then the important piece, which what's the point of building if you can't run it? Okay. And when it's, so it's saying here that I've got an HTTP endpoint sitting on 5035. I can open this in a browser. And there's our hello world, the same one that has our resource name changed when we did the push last week up into Azure, right? So we've got this here. Cool. So we're running, and I think if I go back into Visual Studio Code, I should be able to ports. Here we go. So it's added a port for me, even though we didn't define it. It's added a port for me so that we can get traffic flowing over 5035 to talk to our website, essentially.
Yeah, hosted in the container. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Now, what's cool is now that we've got this running and working, and this is all good, I could take this and deploy or move it up into GitHub. I could give Chris access to it, or he could fork the repository so that he could bring the project over, and he could do the same thing on his machine once he's basically cloned it locally. Or if he has CodeSpaces, he could run it inside of GitHub and run the CodeSpaces up there. And it will run the same way with all the same extensions and the features and the things that we've had added. Chris will get all of those in his machine as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Plus, the port forwarding works, over CodeSpaces too.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was interesting that when it ran, it didn't create an HTTPS version of it. I don't remember when you were looking through the console layout.
Yeah. So it did not. There are, and I think it was this one. No. The registry. So there's a bunch of additional steps we've got to do.
There it is.
To get HTTPS running inside of, and we can do that. I think there's one other thing I wanted to show, and then maybe check this into GitHub somewhere so that it's available.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just noticed that, and look, it's cool. The instructions are right there. So.
Yeah, which is a little different than I think the instructions on the Windows side. Like if we were just running this in VS Code and we wanted to have an HTTP running locally on my machine, and we wanted to have an HTTPS endpoint running, it's a little simpler to do that. Running that command makes it work. In Linux, there's a few more extra steps you had to do around getting that certificate up and running. It's not just run this command.
Yeah, we're basically exporting a certificate, but then also adding probably just a little bit of code. There's probably just a little bit of runtime that's happening when the image is being built to go ahead and install it, right?
Yeah. Let's see this. So we should also have.
So you're back in. This is the terminal from the container now.
Yes. Sorry. So I'll close that out so that we're not running the app anymore. I should be able to. I should have AZ. Yep, I've got that up and running. I should have AZD.
Yep. And you added AZD. Yeah, cool.
So all of those options are in here. We talked about extensions when we were looking at the list, and we can see that
The second group, the Devcontainer. Okay.
Yeah. So we've got this, which is our Azure Developer CLI. Let me open this up a little bit more so we can see what's there. So these are the ones that were installed. So if you remember that list.
Oh, look at there's C# there.
There's C# there. Why would that be?
It might be implicitly included in some of the other.
Yeah. So let's just do. Interesting, as opposed to what was one of the ones we knew we had. Developer CLI was an extension that was in there, and it still says that too. Because if we, let's say that we wanted to, what's another extension that, let me just throw out a name of something that would be, I'm just trying to think of it.
Yeah,
one
like what would be
have.
useful.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't even necessarily have to be super useful, but what about like the REST client extension? I'm just trying to pick something that I know for sure is not in the container.
Yeah, no, totally. That's exactly what I was going for, and that wouldn't make it sound like, well, why would you add that, right? So here's that REST client that you mentioned.
Yeah. Yep.
And we could see here that we can, at the very least, install that in the dev container. So let's go ahead and do that. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to bring that extension into the list of extensions that we have. Available inside the container. Where are we? Down. There you go. REST client. Right. So that's there.
But it's not in the dev container. Yeah. The devcontainer.json file.
Exactly. Right. So there's definitely that disconnect. So you can add things on the fly, but if I was to rebuild that container from the image, then that extension would no longer be there. If I was to close the container and reopen it, yes, because that container still exists. But if I was to say rebuild this container based on the definitions that you have in the dev.json and the Docker file, then that extension goes away. But what I can do is I can say, go ahead and add this to the dev container JSON. And then it says, do you want to rebuild? We don't really need to rebuild because it's already been in there. I think if I close that and bring that back, yeah, we can see that Humeo's REST client is now included in that file. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And something to be aware of, right? So even though you define this, it's not completely set in stone. You still have the ability to augment and make changes to it and rebuild the container, as it were. So I'm going to get rid of this and save it. No, that's fine. Ignore. Okay.
So there is some guidance in the documentation. And when I say the documentation, the AZD documentation, that make your template dev container and CodeSpaces compatible.
Yep.
So that, they go through all the steps here. Maybe I'll get this ready to bring up just so we can look at it.
Set this here.
No, that's the awesome AZD stuff, which is important.
Oh, okay. Yes,
that's
definitely is important.
Okay. I'm back on at this. Let me. I got to add my screen. Yes, you found it. So that's it. And then in this article, without expanding it, you just see the 4 headlines up there, which is understand the architecture, create the project, initialize environment, add bicep files. But when you expand that, we've done some of these other things already. We updated Azure.yaml, and now we were essentially on make your template dev container and CodeSpaces compatible.
Yes.
So that's, like I said, there's their example there, but it's essentially what we've done. And now, once this is done and ready, somebody could get this from just directly from the repo is fine. But I think you're also pointing out that they can get it from awesome AZD when it's in that marketplace, and just without doing anything. I mean, they just go and heck, they could run it in CodeSpaces if they wanted, just to see it, just to get a feel for, do I want this?
Exactly. So maybe we'll make it easy to do that. Let's do Git remote. I don't have any remotes created for this yet, so let's go. This is new. Choose an owner. We'll make it me. Keeps it simple. Repository name. This is EZD Blazor template. We'll leave the description out. Anyone? Yep, that's fine. Don't need a README because we've already got one. All right, we don't need anything else in there because we've already got that in there. So let's create the repository. And then because this is an empty repository, you've got options for how you want to go ahead and do this. So we're going to do this one here around push the existing. So give me this. Copy. Now we've got that. We've got a remote in there with that URL, and then git. We don't need the branch. We're already in main. I think what we need to do is let's do this just to keep things a little clean. See, we'll call it Devcontainer. All right, so now we've got that branch. We could do git add. Got those pieces in it. We'll do git commit. That's fine. And then git push origin dev container. Okay. Oh, darn it. Okay.
What did it do?
Permissions. So this is
Yeah, we talked about this just a couple episodes ago.
Yeah. So going back, what I don't have in here is this.
Yeah, this is basically a problem you were solving that allows you to, on one machine, act as different GitHub personas. I shouldn't say GitHub, but really just personas that happen to be compatible with GitHub. You could use the same stuff anywhere else. And we talked all about, things being stored in the credential store and stuff like that. And so you're switching back because you need a credential that's an administrator in that user account on GitHub so that the whole thing works.
Yeah. So right now it thinks I am thinks I am logged into our GitHub Enterprise environment, which I am, but I don't want that repo to exist there. I want this repo to live in my personal account. So that's why for this particular for this particular project, and this is a project level config, it sits at oh wow, you can't see that at all. Let me see if I can. I don't know that it's going to give me. No, it doesn't understand it at that point. Basically, this is living inside of the .git folder of the project folder that we're in. So once we close the file, that's fine. I'll do that. I'll show you that in a second. If we go to ls, interesting. Okay, that must be a hidden one. We're not seeing it. So inside of this Git folder, that's not listed, but is part of what's underneath the Blazor app, are these other Git related artifacts. One of those being the config.
Yep. You can alter the config per. So because usually most people just you add your information to git config globally, but what you're doing here is you're by that this repository locally is you want it to work with this credential, and then other ones that are for your other credentials you can just set them per repository, and this isn't getting committed anywhere.
Right.
So
right, and the credential manager that we have inside of Windows is a reference in there that says, for github.com/Rich Ross, this is the credentials that you should be using. So now I should be able to do push upstream update of the origin using the dev container. There we go. Cool. No, not that one. This one. Okay, so now if we go look at the code for this, we have a dev container branch, and we've got everything that we had locally. And code spaces, create a new code space.
All right, so now you're totally in the browser.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to pull down the bits of the image. It's going to load the Azure CLI. It's going to load the AZD CLI. It's going to load the extensions so that Visual Studio has the list of extensions that it needs, or that we said it should have in order to run on our project. So all of that takes a little bit of time, but the idea is that we could certainly do this, or anyone can run this now from the browser.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. So what I'm doing here, especially since we've got to wait a little bit, is I'm seeing, here we are, Dev Talk Show. I don't know if this is going to work, which we say all the time. But so your container, your code space is being set up. And there it is. It's going, there it goes.
So welcome to CodeSpaces. You're on a custom image defined in my devcontainer.json. Yeah, and then it knows it's me because it's my, we're running in CodeSpaces using my GitHub account. That's fine. We don't need to worry about that. Yeah, and then you also, much like in Visual Studio Code, we have that little section down the bottom here that says, hey, you're running in a CodeSpaces.
Whoops. I accidentally goofed.
What happened?
There you go. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I accidentally switched screens, and I didn't mean to. One of the things I forget about StreamYard is when you add a new media, it automatically switches to it.
Oh,
and I was I was adding to it in preparation. Yeah. And didn't realize, like, oh my gosh, I took over from Rich's screen. So in any case, I don't know. I think your code space was coming up when I accidentally did that.
That's okay. I didn't show anything else other than is it this? No. Output? No. Problems? No. Yeah, there's no at the terminal. Comments? Nope. Okay. We'll let it go. There was a little bit of ceremony around, hey, you've made it to a welcome to CodeSpaces, basically was what I got. But that's cool. Yeah. And then we're in here in CodeSpaces. If I click on this, just like I do in the in my local version, I could do something where I say, now open this in Visual Studio Code desktop. So I could have it still running in CodeSpaces, but be running from my local instance of Visual Studio Code. So that's another option. So once you get that devcontainer.json and the Docker file all configured, there are so many there's a there are many different ways that you could do this, including having that container sit in a virtual machine that you remote SSH into the machine, and then once you're in the machine, connect to the dev container that way. There's
just do it in your browser. Do it in your browser where the container is hosted in CodeSpaces, and the editor is hosted in your browser. But then there's also, and you can open this just from, I think you can go to Visual Studio Code on your desktop. Like let's say you didn't have a web browser open at all. And I don't know if you need an extension for it, but there's a way to see all your code spaces. And you would say like, yeah, sure. This code space here, I don't know if it's the CodeSpaces extension or if it was part of the other Devcontainer stuff where you basically pick the code space and it says, well, fine, it'll get opened on CodeSpaces, so a machine out there, but edited here locally using the remote SSH stuff, I presume.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and then I think we just do run debug. Yeah, and I know we're good. Do you have to go top of the hour?
Not quite at the top of that. What were you going to run next? Because I was going to try something real quick too. I don't know if it'll work, but
why don't we see yours? I mean,
okay.
All I was going to do was just show, hey, we could debug this just like we did locally in the browser. But I think I'd like to see what you want to show.
Well, so I love doing stuff like this. Totally off the cuff. Haven't tried it.
Okay.
Not 100% sure if it's going to work. This is a Linux Mint VM running on my machine, and of course, everything is super, super small. But let's go to GitHub. I don't know if I'm going to have to log in. I'm hoping I don't. So if I go to GitHub and I say, here's what Ross is saying, and you just added this pretty recently, AZD Blazor template. This is what you just added.
Yep.
And is it going to switch to it? Yes. Okay. So you just switch to this, and this is everything here. So here I am, different operating system. I'm not even logged into GitHub, and I am going to get the clone link, which I hope, I mean, again, very quickly. So here I am in a terminal, and first of all, let's switch to source, and then I'm hoping that this just works. It might not. This could be the world's shortest attempt here. Okay, fine, good.
Nice.
And then, so that was easy. And so now I'm in here. I'm on the Devcontainer branch. So maybe that's the default branch, which it doesn't matter. That's fine.
Yeah, I think it's the only branch we have up there.
Yeah, that's fine. And now let me think about this. If I'm in Visual Studio Code, I can say, I'm going to want to open a folder, and I'm guessing that I want to open the source folder. Let's see. I might need the C# extension, although I might not. It may already be on here. Let's see. Yeah, sure. Of course, I trust the authors. And I don't know that I have it. Git repository was found. Sure, let's do that. And then, yeah, I may need, but I don't know. In order for it to work, I may still need the C# extension. And so let's install that real quick and hope that it's fast. But now the question is that Remote Explorer?
Did I lose your audio?
My door was opened earlier and I needed to get it closed real quick.
Okay, I got you now.
Okay, so now in order to open a dev container,
Are you opening up your own dev container, or are you using the dev container spec?
I want to use what you just did. Open folder in container. Is this what I want?
Well, I think you're too far down, right? You're in the source folder, and the dev container folder is up above that.
So I think this is going to let me pick. Oh no. So I still had some configuration to do on this machine. Current user does not have permission to run Docker. That's true. That's true.
Okay.
Because I basically did I very quickly installed Docker, but I have not finished setting it up. I don't remember. I don't think that's that difficult, but
It does. It used well on the Windows side. That requires a reboot. But
yeah, I know it works. And hold on, maybe this isn't that hard. That would be something else if I could just get this done really quickly. Okay, the group already exists. Great. And now add the user. Great. And let's see if it works. Got permission denied. I'm not 100% sure. Let's see. I probably could have logged out and logged back in, but I'm going to try activating it and then hoping. Oh, it didn't. Docker run hello world. Oh, look at that. Okay. All right. So that's a good sign. Now let's head back to Visual Studio Code and try that again. And it did say open folder and container. So and because of the 3 little dots, this is a little bit of hey, I remember my design affordances that most of us have forgotten. That's telling me I'm going to open a dialog to answer more questions. And but it does. So I wonder if
close and reopen.
Is I have to close and reopen this. Maybe.
Yeah.
Let's do. What you're thinking is first of all, I should hit the dots. You're thinking I do want AZD Blazor template, and you're thinking I want to be in this folder that has the dev container. Maybe. So let's try running code from here.
Because then Visual Studio Code will see it and say, hey, it's dev container. What do you want to do?
So a bunch of stuff happens here. Reopen folder to develop in a container. So it went ahead and did it for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and oh, look, I don't have a .NET Core SDK. Perfect, because I'm reopening in a container. I think I'm right about that. Oh, and then I got the same error you did. But just for the heck of it, I'm going to double check out here. Do I really not have? See, yeah, look at that. I do not have on this.
Nice.
Where I'm at, I don't have .NET installed. That's good. That's an unintended side effect of the demo here, is that I have this VM sort of ready to go where I just have some bare bones. I didn't have Docker on it, though, so I installed that very quickly. And then installed some extensions very quickly. I installed, while you were off screen, where we were looking at yours, I went ahead and installed the devcontainers extension.
Perfect.
And it turns out that there was a remote. Is it the remote extension? There's one of these kind of said hey, I'm really a bunch of extensions. I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah. Devcontainers.
I think so. I think it wanted to install remote SSH, remote tunnels, remote explorer, and it also wanted to install remote SSL, which was I don't really need that. So
WSL.
Yeah, WSL.
Yeah.
We don't have enough acronyms in this industry. We
or
just
coffee
don't.
To keep them all straight. There you go.
This is the one, the remote development pack.
Yes.
And what I did, so I went around it. I don't think there would be any harm in just installing all 4 extensions on a Linux box, but I went ahead and said, I'm going to be stingy, and I'm just going to install the 3 that I care about, right?
Yep.
And look, it's not balking at me here.
No.
It's doing its, while we're sitting here talking, it's doing its thing. And I did nothing more than bring up this VM. It happens to be Linux Mint, doesn't matter what it is. I brought it up. I said, like I said, I keep this in a pretty basic state. So it's got Git, it's got, I think it has AZ, and it has Visual Studio Code, and that's it. That's where I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And while you were working, I said, okay, well, let me get these remote development containers on here. Let me get Docker on here. You could see I had a little bit more to do with Docker. And if you're wondering, how did I figure that out so quickly? In the Docker docs, there is this Linux post-installation steps that I remembered. You got to do something else here. And so I just followed them pretty blindly. But
that's all right. But it's good to know where to look.
Yeah.
Because that seemed to do it.
It is working on this here.
So this is good.
And yeah, this is
Features.
looking really cool. That like basically you set up this project, you got the dev container stuff working. I rush out to a totally different operating system that doesn't even have .NET installed, and say, well, let's see it work. Now, granted, first time through on your machine, there's work to do. This image is being built, but I don't feel like it's this. I don't feel like it's if I stop the image and start again, I don't feel like it's this involved next time.
No, A, it's not that involved next time. And B, if you didn't have this and it's like, well, here's this .NET project, go help me figure out what's wrong with it. You've got to now put .NET SDK on your Linux box, and you've got to make sure you have all of the other things that we've already scoped out in that dev container. So the amount of time it's going to take you to get up and running is certainly way longer than it's going to take for this image to download and get the pieces put in place.
I was hoping it would be a little quicker though.
Well, it's that, let's just do this last thing. Yeah. It says done, but that's not, no.
Installing the Azure CLI is done.
It says it's trying to open the remote.
Yeah, you're right. Left. You're right. In the lower left, it is saying that. Now, granted, I'm running this through a VM. I'm not sure exactly how high powered I made it. Although I've had a lot of success. I used to run an Ubuntu VM, and then I was kind of happier as to how I thought personally. I thought that this was a lighter weight thing. So again, not sure what's going on here, but it's installing the Azure Developer CLI. I think that was on your list. I was hoping to see the Blazor app run through here.
I think you're pretty close.
Yeah. It's amazing how it just sets up the whole thing, and yes, and I'm running in a VM in a host, so it's not exactly. I do want to get a machine running on the metal that I can hook in for our shows too, where instead of switching over to a VM, just switch over to a machine that's on bare metal. I don't know that it would be. I don't know if it would be that much faster, but certainly would be interesting to see. So yeah, in the lower left, it now says Devcontainer Azure Developer CLI. So it has switched Visual Studio Code to kind of tell me you're living in that world now. I think that's what that's saying, right?
Yep, and we should see. I think. Yep, there you go. The folder structure when we're done.
Left. Yep. And okay, so it's detecting some stuff that I don't really care about.
Yeah.
But I should be able to. Can I just run this, or do I need to .NET? You did .NET run.
Yeah. Just so see on the across the menus there. Yeah, to hit the plus.
Create another terminal.
Yep.
So create another terminal. I want to go to source. And first of all, I should spell it correctly. And then I'm in source. And then say, well, here's the one big difference is .NET is installed here.
Right.
Okay. And if I go back out to my host terminal, .NET is still not installed here.
Yeah.
So we are definitely in this container. Should just be .NET build. I wonder if run would have built it too. I think so.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've done it. Okay, now moment of truth here. This is really could not find a project to run.
And go down one more level. Or can you specify run this project?
Oh, it's because I'm in the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is it. I think I could specify. As you can see, I'm a little lazy though. So, okay, so now here's the interesting thing. So in this container, and like it says here, your application running on port 5035 is available. So let's go ahead and open it. Now it's opening it on the host, but the host is a VM in my Windows host. and here it is. It's all here. Everything works. Firefox, that's it. Everything works great. You know, developers aren't very good at counting, so we have to have apps do it for us. It's funny. I was in a stream the other day, and somebody in the comments made a great joke. I don't remember who they were. I'm totally stealing the joke, where they say, in the future, aliens from another civilization are going to discover our code and say, wow, whatever beings lived here really had problems keeping count and keeping track of what they wanted to do that day. So they wrote numerous applications to do so. So anyways, that's it. I know we went a little over, but here we are in Linux. And the reality is I set it up from soup to nuts as you were talking, you know, really quick compared to a process of, okay, welcome to your new job, and oh, go install the tools, and then oh, go look at this document that somebody wrote that's 8 months old, and it turns out it's got a lot of missing steps in it, either because the person creating the document didn't realize what was already pre-configured, or things have changed. Because that happens, things change. And we're going to see that on a future show where we're getting very close to a show on contributing to ASP.NET. And for me to download the code and get running ASP.NET from source, built from source, there's some very good documentation, and then there were some old videos that I watched, but the videos are 1 to 2 years old, and there's like missing steps in the videos, or maybe the steps have altered just a little bit. And that's just because things have changed. So yeah, that was cool.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a nice way to kind of close the circle on the Devcontainer piece. Awesome.
Yeah, so now let's here's the, oh, you know what? I never did turn on this when we switched.
But
I never turned, because this is manual. This is manual to turn that on and off. So I never did that. And then, you know, here we are. Automating that will be fun, but that's it. So that was cool, Rich. I'm glad that we got the Devcontainer working in the AZD template. So one step closer. Looking at that documentation, there's just a couple steps left. They talk about, I think it sounds like you can have a ready to go GitHub Action or Azure DevOps pipeline too.
Yes, exactly. And that's hopefully would be, you know, one more show to kind of wrap that up and get that in a state where we could deploy that now, or offer that up as a potential template, which would be cool.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, hey, if it's 9 o'clock for you, you might be late for stand-up. So thank you for joining us. And Rich, that was great. And we will see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.